The society that we're about to talk about is a society that is free of all the old superstitions, incarceration, prisons, police, cruelty, and law. All laws will disappear.
When you study law, even in a limited way, like I am as a paralegal student, you realize that the law itself is not merely criminal, but also civil. You realize that it's not merely reactive, but it's prescriptive. And ultimately, it's not there simply to punish people. It's not simply there, a trial, for example, is not simply there to punish the criminal or to punish the individual who committed negligence or who was held liable for any amount of damages. What's also at work there with the law, and particularly with the court system, is the interest in making the wronged party whole again. An argument that I've been sitting on for an anarcho-capitalist conversation is just that if a person is wronged because of someone else's negligence and now they incur great losses in say, medical bills and such, that they wouldn't have to incur if it wasn't for someone else's negligence. In a statist society, we could hold the feet to the fire of the wrongdoer and demand that they make the wronged whole again. In an anarchist, at least an anarcho-capitalist society, that wouldn't be the case. We wouldn't have the ability to hold them accountable. All that an independent arbitrator would be able to do is find the facts that, yes, indeed, this was wrong, or this indeed was a negligent act, and your medical expenses ought to be paid by the wrongdoer and not yourself. But to actually go out and twist someone's arm in such a way that it can't be done, and I don't want to go into much detail, and I know that's going to upset some people because they're going to jump up and down, because I know there are a lot of anarchists out there on YouTube. But anyway, it's a bullshit thing. There it is, in a nutshell. But what's different, though, and what's interesting about the Venus Project is that it does away with money as well. So the whole notion of say, civil procedures and litigation and torts and such like that, where you're dealing with monetary damages, like medical bills or damage to your home or so on and so forth. It would seem that in the Venus Project city, anyway, no one person would necessarily take blame for it. If something goes wrong, that is to say, if something was to go wrong and say one of these really shiny looking cars whizzes off the road and plows into your home and destroys a part of it, who would be responsible for fixing it? Well, I guess it'd be the city would be responsible for fixing it. And certainly we could say the technology would be such that we would minimize the necessity for additional resources to come into the world or into the system in order to fix the problem. But in some situation, you will need to do some amount of patch-up work. Is that not realistic to say? I mean, even if he has this wire coil that he likes to show off in a lot of his videos that when treated with heat will come back into a particular shape. Well, if you run your car into my house, and my house is made of that material, I could just heat my house and it would pop back into shape. That's all fine. But what if, in running into my house, you kill my child? Right? The house might be able to pop back, but the child is now dead. What do we do with that? In our society, to give you a point of contrast here, in our society, I could sue you in a civil action for wrongful death and say, look, now I have pain and suffering and all these other sort of damages, and certainly a lot of those damages, with the exception of sort of like the emotional stuff, which is more soft than just medical bills and such, which wouldn't be present in the Venus Project. There are still some kinds of damages that we recognize today anyway, that we feel are good enough, valid enough to award some kind of recovery for. What would recovery be in the Venus Project world? Would there be any recovery? Am I just SOL that my child is dead because something happened and whatever? Because let's run with this, and this is going to get sort of, I don't know, abstract, because I'm assuming that you know a little bit about the Venus Project situation. If we have say a car that runs itself, the person inside could not be held liable for the death of my child. However, it might be that we can hold the designer liable for a faulty design, something that, look, it ran off the tracks. An expert in the field could, an independent expert could look over the schematics of the design and say, here's your problem, it's right here. He ought to have known, or she ought to have seen that, didn't, and now they are, at least in theory, liable for the death of the child. Well, now what? In the Venus Project world, none of these kinds of questions are ever asked. No answers have been given. There is no way that or if it was your child, that you could recover for the loss of that child. All we would have to do is just say, hey, we can only do our best, and we're very sorry, and that's very sad, but there it is. And maybe that's the right answer. I don't know. There is something sort of soft and very distinct, to say the least, about pain and suffering damages that we can collect in our legal system today. And that maybe we should really just tell those people too to go pound sand. That, $100,000 or whatever, $250,000, $2 million, $10 million would never replace a life, or could never compensate the wrongful death of a child. But are we really to leave them with nothing? It's really a question that I really don't have an answer for. Maybe the most sane thing is to just simply say, look, we're all responsible for the technology in our society, and mistakes and accidents happen, and it's so long as it wasn't intentional, there's nothing that can be done, or nothing that should be done. But then that's kind of the tripping point, isn't it? When we say intentional, what do we do with individuals who intentionally do these sorts of things? Jacques Fresco is quick to make the argument that if people get what they want and have their basic needs provided for, that you'll see criminal activity be reduced dramatically. But he's very careful about his language in this, if you've seen him. And he does this every time he talks about this. He never says that crime will be reduced completely. And that's intelligent of him to say. However, it begs the question of what do we do with those criminals who are, albeit few and far between? What's important to note here is that even if we were to say, for example, that person X is mentally incapacitated in some way, intellectually disabled, something, he's just nuts, all right? And he goes around raping children, killing old women, whatever the case may be, any kind of antisocial, sort of destructive to society kind of behavior it might be, we could say that, look, an individual like that, since our technology and science is now at the forefront of our society, we could discover a cure for this individual. The question then is, what do we do if he's not willing to comply with treatment? If he willingly walks into the treatment hospital and say, yes, look, I think this is all very wrong of me, I shouldn't be molesting children and killing old ladies, please inject me with the serum that will change my neurology such that I am all better. However, in any situation where the individual is not willing to walk into the hospital, so to speak, and receive that magical cure, or very, not to degrade it, but that very reliable, scientific, whatever, tried and tested cure, whatever it might be in the distant future, we're in a situation where we have an unwilling patient. And who has the authority in a Venus Project world to exercise a coercion over that individual, to exercise the power of restraint and seizure, really, where you seize their freedom of mobility, where you strap them down, where you say, no, you have to do this, it's for the good of the society. It's at that point where we start to get into kind of scary sci-fi kinds of situations, where if we were to assume authority over people sort of for the greater good, well, now it's like this sort of hive mind kind of weirdness, which maybe that's what we should be doing. The point though, however, is that I would like a Venus Project person to make that argument. That's a philosophic argument to be made. And if really we need to just say, look, it's for the greater good, you know, that is Borg talking. I mean, I was teased, and I told you this in earlier videos, that, you know, I sounded like a Borg talking about the Venus Project. But really, we need to talk about how we change people's behavior who are unwilling to change. Even if crime is drastically reduced, what do we do with those few criminals left over? And until I get an answer to that, it's a no from me for the Venus Project.